I think a few more people will hop in, but hey, you are here and it is your floor. Tell me what's at top of your mind.
I'd say two areas that I'd love to
Yeah.
see something happening. Yeah.
Yep.
So the first one is I use your tools in kind of two ways, right? I make tables and adjust tables. And then I've been having a great time doing functions and endpoints and stuff with it.
Oh,
Great.
nice.
Been doing marvelous work on the function. Yeah.
That's
And,
good.
but there's the, like with the database tools, there's a couple of them that don't function correctly. So there's like the odd thing that isn't working, right? So I guess number one would be a way to log problems with you.
Yes.
A
Actually,
double route for doing that.
I have a very quick question, actually. I'm very curious because you mentioned that the functions are working for you. How is your experience with that? Because that's a mixed bag and not everybody says the functions work. I'm a bit surprised. Usually it's the
Oh,
opposite. The database is great. Functions not so great.
yeah, no. So the where I've been using it to do function, yeah, initially it was doing things like it would get me so far, and then I would say I just need it to do some little bit, and then it would trash its work and go all over the place and make horrible mistakes and keep repeatingly. But what I've learned to do is whenever it learns something new, I've tried it this way. I tried it. Oh, now I see. Now I understand. I get it to write a document and save that stuff, right? So I'm constantly updating my sort of learning, right? The other one
Yeah.
was like its approach. So this happened very recently. We was doing a function and it was going, yeah, it's done. And I'd look at the results and I'd say, it's still missing. I'm not getting these values in this section of the output, right? And it would say, I know what the problem is, and it does something, and it's like, go ahead and you test it and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
did that 3 times. Right. So in my
Yeah.
mind, I go, you don't know what the problem is. You're just telling me you do each time. And I traced through, I worked out roughly where the problem is. Yeah. So I said, look, do me another API, do me another endpoint with just this section, create this test scenario. Let's look at that bit in isolation. Yeah. And then once we worked out what the problem is there, we can then return to the main big beast that I'm working on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did that and we solved the problem. Then it seems to have learned, because after 2 or 3 attempts, when I'm saying no, the results haven't changed, I do it twice and it will say, let me create a test endpoint with just this bit, and it just does that itself. So again, once it did it itself, I said, I've noticed you've done that. Do yourself a document to explain this testing approach. Whenever you reach a problem and you've tried it 2 or 3 times with me, now isolate it and do another endpoint and test it in isolation. So now
Yeah.
it's part of our workflow. So to be honest, it has taken a while, but I'm getting great results building functions now.
Nice. And
Maybe mine is other.
no, I think that first of all, I think that's actually really interesting because in itself, it's a different way of building software. And it just requires, I think what you're stumbling onto, which is the same thing, which I've realized, which is that it's just a different way of debugging and different way of finding out the truth. It's putting it in a situation where, okay, I know that you're going to hallucinate or tell me things that are not necessarily true. I'm going to now ask you to do something different so that it just shifts things up, right? Because if it has this tendency to just be like a people pleaser where it just wants to make you happy eventually, even if the truth is not like that, it didn't change anything or whatever. And so I find that, which is why I was going to ask if you still use Claude Code, because I'm curious about the environment you're working with it in.
I'm using a bit of both. What I've found is in terms of that learning, so where I'm making it write documents and things, it's easier to use the project concept in Claude. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm getting,
okay.
for the most part, it's building functions quite well in Claude now. I have 2 projects, one for that is the expert and writing prompts, and then another one that does the making. So still trying to separate the 2 a bit out. But then I've learned so many lessons, right? And stored so many documents. I've got documents in 2 different projects now. I need to consolidate all my documents at some point.
Actually, I was going to say that. So one of the things that I found really helps, and this is where I think that there's just a line between, okay, the MCP tool does XYZ and it does all this stuff. And then there's how do we set up our workspace so that we are just have a lot of visibility into what documents does it have access to and so on, because the more that's a black box, then I think it just ends up it's very easy for the AI to just, the better that we can set up our documentation and everything that it has access to and to verify certain things and work with it in that way, I found that it's easier to get better results. And I'll share my screen really quickly just to show you what I mean. But like, essentially what I mean is just using essentially Visual Studio. I don't know if you've ever used Visual Studio with Claude Code.
No.
Okay. With Claude Code, you can use actually Visual Studio. So if I come I'm just going to open up a new window And over here, actually, what you can do is just come over and click on the side over here where there's basically extensions that you can install, right? And if you just type in Claude into the top, it'll show you Claude code. It's really just that easy, like to install it. And I'm just going to actually just update this one. And once you have it, right, installed, just like that, you're able to, let's actually come into here. I'm going to open up a new folder. Let me just open up something so I can show as an example. And I'll open up, let's say, sorry, just one sec. I'm going to want to open up something useful. Actually, I'll just open up the MCP tool. So test MCP deploy. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So once you have this opened up, like you're just looking at a regular Visual Studio environment. However, here we have this orange button in the top right, and that's just Claude. Right. So now you can just fire up Claude in Visual Studio. And the reason why I like doing this is because I have full visibility into all my files, right? Like even if I don't want to necessarily, let's say I'm working on pure Xano, right? And I'm not actually leveraging like deploying any files or anything like that, or which honestly, I think actually one of the most useful things that I do is actually deploy and build on that front end, right? From this environment. And I'm able to use the MCP tool to connect, to bring in both worlds together, right? Like very fluidly from here, from this point of view. And really what it also lets you do is like, if we look over here, I can put in documents, right? Like it says XanoScript docs over here on the left. I can, these documents now, they're under my control. It's not, and just like you found that it can say, oh, this is true, but it's not true. And it can be very misleading. This is another way I've found that it does that with everything. It does that with even documentation. It'll say, this is true, this or this is true, and it's not. And so for me, I'm able to get very much, not just better results, but also just maintain my own sanity because I'm able to actually be in control and say, okay, this is the documentation, this is what's true. And now let's leverage this while still having this chat experience because all my MCP tools are still right there. There's no, it's the same thing, except now I have all my document. I haven't gone back to the terminal since I started doing it this way. And just because I'm such a heavy user of probably nobody uses the tool more than I do and works on it more than I do. And I almost lost my mind with not seeing my documentation and seeing all that stuff after a while. And I noticed that I got to what I wanted so much faster the moment I started just embracing that the documentation being in front of me. And even when it makes changes, actually, one thing that I've also realized, it just makes me think about the tool differently in a lot of ways because I can actually see the XanoScript, right? That's being generated. Like I could tell it, hey, put the XanoScript, it's not working. Put the XanoScript onto a markdown page, right? Show me the XanoScript and I'll fix it. Let me look at it and I'll tell you what I think is wrong. Right, for example. And now we can get there faster, right? And so I just want to mention that this is something that is hugely helpful when it comes to just getting better results out of it. So I figured that if you're using it that much, that you might find this interesting.
Absolutely. Even in where it's got documentation stored in a project, which is supposed to be cached. Yeah. So it's supposed to be effectively aware of it. It will do something and it will fail or we'll have a problem. And I know I've been past this before, right? So I'll say,
yeah,
go look at the blah, blah, blah document. Yeah. We've already covered this. And then it will go, oh yes, no, you're right. Now I know what to do again. Yeah. But even when it's documented, it skips it or it doesn't pay attention to it always and just seems to try things out in incorrect formats and incorrect ways. But it's good to have the documentation there and you can point it at it. And yeah, I'm liking this. I think just because I know Nelson's arrived and other people will probably arrive, I will just say the other thing was
sure.
The one way to formally log a problem or a technical issue with one of the tools. And then the other one was I am desperate, Robert, desperate for this. Like I'd like this now, today, if you can. Currently, my MCP tool set is talking to one Xano environment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
And I need it to talk to the other one I'm working on because it would be so helpful.
At the same time,
I became an agent. Not at the same time. I can work separately, but I only have one MCP account. So what I guess I could change the key stored, right?
You could. Let's say, for example, for me, if I wanted to do that really quickly, this is what I would literally do. I would come over into obviously like where I can edit my API key, right? And let me just quickly sign in. So what I would do is I would just save a new API key here. And then I would come over into where I'm working, right? And like now I want to change, right? So I'm going to do /MCP from here. and I'm going to click on Zeno, whichever this is a demo, but like for Zeno, I'm going to just select the MCP tool I'm using, and then I'm going to press on re-authenticate. And when I do re-authenticate, it's going to do a fresh retrieval of whatever API key that you have stored at that moment. And you're going to do this just one more time. And then after you do this, it'll be a new system. I just want to point that out because I think that's probably, I can't imagine, even if I built something, I don't know if it would be easier than that. Like it would be more or less the same. It would still require re-authentication. That second part, there's no way getting around it because it will always need to be re-authenticated to get that fresh key. I mean, and really when it comes to the only thing that I could think of to make it more easy would be maybe that you can, like here in this environment, we could maybe say, okay, this is the key. This is the one that I want active. And then instead of having to paste it in every time and say, this is the one, so there you go. There's the answer. All right. So you know what? I like that. I think that we can, that's something that the 20% that brings 80%. So it is noted and yeah, it'll be in there. I'm going to try to get it in there. And I think then that combined with just re-authentication will get you what you want. I'll do that.
Awesome. You should probably welcome your other guest.
Yeah, of course. Nelson, how are you? Oops. Not
Good. Just many people on meetings here. So had to.
Cool.
Yeah. Looking forward to learn more about the MCP. It's something I have been for a bit.
Yeah.
Background is in UX design, so something I'm curious to see how it works and how can I leverage it.
For sure. MCP UI. If I come actually here, I just made a link to it, but there's essentially, I just got it up and going with this instance that represents a demo of MCP. And I thought that this was quite interesting because MCP UI, if I come over to the repo for it, basically lets you create more like a visual experience. So you can see how these graphs pop up essentially.
Yeah.
Exactly. Generative. And this was quite interesting, like for me to work on. Like I spent a couple days last week working on this. And so what I managed to do was get it working actually with the MCP tool. If I come over here, I can see I already have my MCP tool added to it. If I click on connect, then it's going to connect over with the tools. And then I'm able to say, what are my instances? Let's just see if it works. But what it should do is then essentially perfect. So it's retrieving the information. I'm going to say, what are the database tables in workspace 7? And the part that this is this is a combination of, you can see here actually, so this is what's good. I was trying to get it to do back-to-back steps, which is, it's doing it now. And you can see it's still doing its thing in the corner. Perfect. Okay. So I think there's like a few things in this, which to me, I felt like this was worth working on. The first thing was I want to take this out of Claude Code. There's a lot of people who don't want to use Claude Code or just don't like the way the terminal looks or what have you. And I think that part of a nice thing would be to control the environment, right? To make MCP tools so if someone can just come and use something like this, which absorbs more complexity, then that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
There's the other part, which is because the MCP tool itself has authentication. So the bigger pain in the ass, to be honest, was figuring out how to do which I managed to get that working. Actually, since you guys showed up, I'll invite you to the repo for this because I already figured it out. So I'll invite you guys to the repo that I have for this, because I just took this but this wasn't good enough because it didn't have, and that means that I can't use it. So what I did was I combined it with another SDK from Cloudflare that gives it. And what I found from working on this was that you end up having to coordinate between just those different SDKs, right? This one is going to be concerned with generating visual graphs, like that translation of the responses coming back, and the MCP tool itself has to communicate in a way that it's not making anything visual right now because my MCP tool doesn't return back information that represents anything visual. So that's the part where I still have to add that in. However, what it does do is it's just, at the very least, it connects with OAuth, which is actually more of my concern. And it also provides this entire environment. And also, actually, this is something that, again, I think is very good. It allows me to use different eyes with it. So I'm no longer stuck with just using Claude Code or Claude, which is another thing that really bothers me with this. I want to use GPT-5. I want to use all the models, right? Or if, let's say, the sky falls down and one of them decides that they're going to raise their prices too high or whatever, right? Just to have more ownership of this. So there's a few things that are bundled into this that made this to me seem like it was worth exploring. Okay, now I can have it on my own URL with any AI I want. Is it perfect? No, but I mean, from the relative to the amount of effort I put into it, it got to this point relatively very fast, right? Which is why I was like, oh, this is notable. Seems like it has potential. So yeah, I'll just pause there for a second, but that's why I think that MCP is very interesting. I think that it has some potential there, especially if we're people who are trying to use these tools more and more and use them.
And can you, for example, give a little bit more instructions, like when, let's say you are building a product and you want to, in certain topic, you want to use a certain type of, can you somehow define a component and somehow instruct them to use that component if they are going to say something related to X topic?
Yeah. So basically, like when we make a request to one of these tools, they already return back a response, right? Like it's going to just return back a fixed response. And this is something that when you design the MCP tool, that we can control through the design of the MCP tool. So if I come back, actually, this is actually the code base this is the middleware. This is the MCP tool code base. If I look through, I can see that essentially I have control over everything. Like for any one of these tools, I can control exactly what's being sent back as a response. So along those same lines, if we're looking to basically work with, like, leverage what this SDK allows us to do, let me just see if they maybe show it here, but actually it's actually here. So like we start to define essentially with MCP tool, what's going to be added to it is basically these props, which is going to play nice with the SDK that's here. So that it's saying, okay, fine, I'm going to, instead of just sending you back text, I am an MCP tool that sends back now also graphs. Like one of the things that I return back is HTML that represents graphs, for example, or an iframe or whatever. And so the SDK is expecting that, it receives that. And so every time that tool is called, you're always going to get back that specific visual representation, because that's always what it returns back. But it's dynamic. It's like, depending on whatever information surrounds it, the context that went into it, it'll be at different values in that graph and so on. And so it can be a variety of ways that it can be represented within that context. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes.
Cool. And I found that this was actually quite good, because it's pretty lightweight as far as something has to change. But as far as like when I look at my MCP tool, I see the amount that I would have to change in order to accommodate for this, it's relatively small. Like all I have to do is just add an additional response. So I'm not having to rework everything in order to accommodate for this. To me, this represents like Pareto's principle, like that 20% that'll bring you the 80% of your results. Like that, to me, this has those qualities of, all right, fine, I can figure out, just make an additional response there. And another thing that I like about this is it's flexible. Like I've found that it, at least from what I could see so far, that it can also leverage other libraries within what it represents. Like maybe it could use Rechart, like libraries that make beautiful charts. And that's another thing that I'm looking into is it going to lock me down into like pure CSS? Is there something that what is something I can leverage just to, again, like move quickly to get it representing itself in a beautiful way? Another SDK that has caught my attention is actually Crayon. I don't know if you've heard of Crayon.
From Thesis, right?
So yes, exactly. No, you're right. It's from Thesis. So Thesis themselves, they use this as part of their, like, this is their paid offering, but underneath this, like what they built it on is their open source tech called Crayon. So let me actually see. I think they have a demo here somewhere. Where's their demo? I want to see. Oh, here it is. Try Playground. Basically, I got this also working as well. Let me log in. And essentially the same idea, but the idea behind this is again, like a visual, more of an interactive back and forth with it. So to say, hello, show me something. I'm not sure, but it'll show, but let's see. Composing response. There you go. So you can see it's more visual, right? Like it's giving you back, like you're able to click actually, and to really have a different experience with it. This is something that kind of stood out to me because again, like there's a few things that are wrapped up in this, but okay, there's this visual part. And then there's also the fact that you can see here, I can add more MCP tools, and
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm trying to just illustrate here is I think this is pretty cool. This is something that when I think about clients and building the experience for people, again, like not everybody wants to work with this. I can appreciate that now over time. That I've showed this enough to people and they're like, when people look at this, they're like, not everybody, this doesn't work for everybody, right? But however, there is this, right? This is something now I can even imagine from like a sales point of view. If there was a button here that says, hey, click here and it's going to open up a Stripe modal that lets you pay, and just to be able to reduce the friction in so many different ways. Like you can just imagine really when you put this in the context of clients and their business, then they're the ones who will come up with the ideas. But yeah, to me, I think this is where I start to bridge the gap a little bit between where it is now and where there's like a whole other market of people who this is what they're waiting for, as theoretically, of something that meets them at this stage.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I have been also doing some research and we are going into that direction, but it's like some people, like the last year, we're gonna go all to terminal interactions. Everyone was talking terminal.
Yeah.
I tried cloud coding the terminal. It didn't really work for me. And then I started using it inside Cursor because you kind of have both words. So you can see the code, you can more or less get familiar with it, but you still can leverage cloud code inside. So that's really my setup. And I also use, I think it's a stage-wise, allows me to give visual feedback. Of course, like it's good if you are not like very technical, you can just go to your local host and you can just click and say, this is wrong, that wrong. And it automatically adds it to your input.
That's actually interesting what you mentioned about local hosts. I just want to mention, because I think that as far as MCP tools go, like one thing that I found to be very useful, I don't know if you guys have ever used the Playwright MCP.
I wish that you have time.
This is extremely useful. I think that actually out of all the tools MCP tools I've used, that one is one of the ones I use the most heavily. And let me see if I can actually just open up a new window here. I'm going to actually just pull up my website, and here I'm going to just verify that I have Playwright. So I have Playwright already here, right, as one of my MCP tools. And just to make it clear, like how easy it is to install this, if I just come over here to Playwright and I see one of these options is Cloud Code, I copy this. So literally I just copied this one line. I come back here, I click up here on top, it's going to open up my terminal. And after the terminal actually shows me something, which is strange why it's not, but essentially, this is a read-only. Interesting. Oh, you let me unlock it. Yep. Console terminal. Oh, here we go. Perfect. I'm not going to click enter because I already have it here and I want to show you guys something. But after you hit enter, that's it. Literally, it installs. You can close this and you just open up you click on this orange button again. It's going to be there. It's going to be one of your tools instantly, right? So what does that let you do? So now I can tell it run a server in the background on port, let's say 3000, and use Playwright to visit the deployed website here. So what this does is, besides the obvious of letting it open it up and visit it, it will allow it to see the results of what it's doing in real time. And I found this to be very powerful. I hate taking screenshots. I hate copy paste. Like I don't want to be a bottleneck on the process. And I found that this was a way to get myself out of that. And if we think about even the Xano MCP tool and the applications for it, this is why I like using this environment, because now on one side, I have perfect access to Xano through this, right? And I have all my files and I have everything. Now I also have access to the front end perfectly from here as well. I always did, but now, it's really able to see what that looks like in real time and change it and test it. It can actually test and use the application and find out where it's not working, which, to your point, Luke, about how you mentioned that sometimes it misleads. It says, this is true, this is not true. If it takes a screenshot, it's hard for it to avoid the truth. And so this is a technique for that, right? Let me see if I go to localhost 3000 and perfect. So it's running now the website in the background. And now I'm going to tell it, okay, so because it's going to time out and wait for that to time out, I'm going to say use Playwright to visit it, the MCP tool. And let's see.
You also have another one that's called Stagehand that does something similar, right?
Yeah, I've tried a few of them. This is the one I like the most. But yeah, you can see right now, this window is in Playwright, right? I don't even have to look at this window. I can go do something else. I can do my own thing and it can take screenshots. And that's another thing that was important to me. I don't want to be I've used other tools before that require me to be on the same window as it and like at all times for it to see what's going on. And it just drove me crazy. But so now it's able to see what's actually here. because it can take screenshots, right? And I can say, oh, I can see console errors. I can see this stuff and whatever. I can say, for example, change the view of it to mobile, for example, right? And this will be something that it can just control from here, right? So now it can see them. It just did that automatically, right? Like it can see, oh, this is what the mobile version looks like, and just do all that stuff for you instead of us having to, like, when you take this, right? And now I give it instructions and I say, all right, now you're going to launch a sub agent. And with that sub agent, you're going to use Playwright and you're going to do this loop. Do it over and over, right? And keep looking at your results and then improve. And look at your results and improve. And then I can just disappear for whatever, an hour, I'll do something else. And then I come back and I have noticed it's hard to deny that the results are better. It will be better. But when you tell it to do that and you give it this tool and you put it in that situation. Yeah, I just want to say that that's something that really helped me out. Would recommend.
And I have, like, regarding to Playwright, I thought I did some research on it because in one of my projects, I need to go into a website, log in and extract some information. Is there a way to pass credentials using Playwright in a way that's not plain text, like in that secure way?
I feel like it would be possible because you're able, like in Chrome, we're able to leverage, for example, if you already I have password manager that's in my Chrome account, right? And because it's essentially just mimicking a person clicking, and this is another Chrome profile, I'm just not signed into my Chrome profile here. But if I was, it would have access to my same password manager and to whatever else I wanted to have access to. And this environment cannot tell the difference between me clicking or Playwright. Like it's the same it's the same thing as like a human being clicking. From what I have found, I would
But if it's from users, like my question is, let's say my customers, they share their credentials so we can go do the work for them, extract the data from like the system they use and then process it. So each user will have different credentials.
So you could always just save it. Would you not be comfortable with just saving it as one of your .env files here? Is going to be as part of your project, like for example, like the same way you might have Nikes or something?
They are saved in Xano. The idea was having some kind of background job that would just run and use an MCP, like something like this. The part that I was it's doable, though. The part that I wasn't really sure was like how secure it is to pass some of these credentials, because this is quite serious access to company information. So I was like, maybe I need to search a bit more.
I think that it's more or less, I think there's probably an easy way to do it that's just putting it into a file here, and then it has access to it. And then there's probably other ways to do it, which involve perhaps hashing it and so on, but it's going to just require more tighter control on how the MCP tool, like the instructions for the agent and using the tool itself. So I would say that it's for sure, it's technically doable. Probably the bigger challenge would be just making sure that it's not getting in your own way, right? Because that's something that I found can easily happen with this, is that a lot of the time we add steps in, or it will tend to add steps in between that will create artificial barriers. So maybe there just has to be a balance there, I would say. Like the more complicated or harder we make it for it to accomplish the task, then that could also be a source of real suffering, I would say. Yeah, but I can just say that there's a way to do that if you didn't care about security, that for sure there's a way to do it very fast. And probably even if you do care about security, I would just say for me personally, if I found that putting it into a .env file, whatever I find is sensitive, or even just having, again, it also maybe depends on the context. You want to be completely hands off with it. Like it's totally running in the background and never even have any.
For now, I could technically not be hands off, but in the future, as it grows, because it would be like doing at least once per week per user. So we don't have a lot of users right now, but in the future, it becomes like,
yeah, I would just try first and see, does it do it at all? And then refine it from there. Like I would start with just, okay, can you do this if I give it to you in a very obvious way? And then, okay, can you do this if I ask you to put this extra step in between? And then keep taking it through those steps with it until seeing, okay, we're either getting to where we want to be, or we're moving in the wrong direction. And so probably I think that's what I would personally do. I would even come into here and see, all right, so can you go into Xano and get the information that I'm looking for you to get? Yes or no, right?
I will give it a try and I will let you know if it works.
Yeah, for sure. Please do. Mihai, how are you doing?
Hey, hi. Yeah, all good. Just jumping in.
checking what's going on.
Cool. Yeah, great to have you. And I know we had just met recently, and we were talking about the middleware side of things, which goes back to what I'm trying to release soon for you, Luke, which is the next version of the tool, which was I was mostly focusing on how to build with XanoScript, but you've already got it working quite nicely with functions, but I still think. Sorry, Luke, because I'm just turning it back to you for a second. And because my question to you is essentially, it surprised me how you said that it was working well for you with functions. Like that still surprises me. I think that what I'm mostly trying to do is to make it flawless, I suppose, with building functions and endpoints and everything. So I'm wondering, like, where does it mess up for you most of the time? Or does it, like you said, like it does mess up, but your experience is interesting.
So I have built some functions recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have only touched to look at the results. I don't do any workings on the functions from start to finish. Yeah. I get that. I get Claude to do the whole thing. And I think what I find is that it will go, yeah, I understand the requirements, and it goes and builds a function straight off the bat. And you can see the architecture and you can see, okay, it's got the right sort of idea. It's doing the sort of things I expect it to do. And then I'll run it and it'll get a 500 error. Bang, straight off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just simply say, I just copy and paste that and say, got this. And it will say, I know what that is. And it varies, right? So there's some sort of formatting and things that it gets off. There's things like nested loops and a few other scenarios that when you can put it into Xano that way, but it just doesn't seem to work.
Nested loops example.
Yeah, nested loops and a few other things like that. So then you go, okay, make it simpler and approach it from a different way. No nested loops, please, and things like that. Then there's like syntax. It regularly gets syntax wrong. Even when I've documented it multiple times,
yeah,
it will get them wrong. But then you can fairly quickly, especially if it's one I've seen before, I can say, hey, look, we've covered this, read the document, and then it will go, oh, I know what to do now. So that having that library of lessons learned. Yeah. And first I was storing them in big documents. Now what I have is lots of little documents of individual lessons learned. So I can go, I think there's a document on that. Oh yeah, there's a document with something about that, exactly that. I've read the document. Now I understand what to do. So that gets me out of a lot of trouble quicker now. And then what's the other one?
Preconditions, maybe.
Yeah, there's some of that stuff. It uses filtering and things in Xano in a way.
Yeah.
When I look at it, I think that should work, but it's not working.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've had to suggest, or I've manually fixed a couple of things. Yeah, changed it. Especially looking for an ID in a collection rather than like equals. Right? Gets that one regularly wrong. And I don't know if the way I've configured it is the right approach. Is I've made it work, right? There's that one. It gets that one quite wrong. But I think so. The bigger problems were it would get me so far, and I'm getting my 80%, right? The results are looking like, hey, we're getting there. I just need to tweak it a bit more and add that one more thing. And then I could be spending quite a while trying to get that to work.
Yeah.
And the first few times I tried it, Robert, I just settled for the 80%. I was like, okay, that'll do for now. I'll come back to that one later, or I'll get one of my developers to look at it. Yeah. So add that other bit. But what recently, I think maybe because of the extra lessons and the documents and the approach, isolate a bit and test it in isolation. Build another endpoint just with that bit in it, and let's solve that problem there. That approach has got me further, and I've ended up, I think the last 3 functions I've done 100% through the AI.
Nice.
Just in the last,
very nice.
Which is great. It's great to hit that 100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a case of veering. I think maybe, I don't know whether the tools or the sort of the explanation for the tools or is that Xano script. I think it's capable of, although Xano script is a documented scripting language, it seems to be capable of writing it many different ways.
Yes.
And not all of them work. Not all of them work.
Yes.
And it will even submit them and it will get them in and then they won't work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the script's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
But often it's just approach something incorrectly. And as long as you can get to that bit, that's what I found was when it's trying to, especially when you've got the project, it's quite large at this point and you're trying to amend just one little bit. I think it's better to tell the AI to duplicate that in another endpoint, solve the problem over there and then come back to the main one.
Yeah.
Been a bit of a breakthrough really in making it change its behavior.
And what you mentioned too about filters, I think is a very hard thing I think the AI has no idea about how filters work in their relationship with functions and how closely tied they are to each other. And for me, how preferable they are compared to expression syntax, because everything that it's ever been trained on, I think, nothing has ever pointed it towards daisy chaining pipeline filters as being the way that it should go. Like that, because it doesn't have the understanding that's going to end up being something that represents itself well on Xano. It will do everything in its power to move away from that, right? And moving back towards what works in JavaScript, like adding / comments or everything else that doesn't play nicely with the parser. And that's what I'm doing, or what I felt is what I guess that's what I'm doing this for, which is to try to create a SDK that essentially just makes it so that it can't make those mistakes anymore, right? It is a library of functionality. Let me just find my library, but this is going to look a little bit crazy, but essentially just trying to take the entire Xano script and turn it into just this, essentially add like an abstraction on top of it that turns it more into JavaScript type of syntax, and making it so that if, for example, that it just reduces the number of options, really. So that if we say we want to define a variable, or if we want to do this, do that, whatever we want to do, that it's going to do it in a way that just spits out the syntax that plays nicely with Xano in the form of Xano script.
Yeah. Sometimes because it's building a script, and then obviously on the Xano screen, we see it in that no code way, all those blocks and loops and what have you. And it's got no comprehension. That's what you're right. No comprehension of that. Often, sometimes, like if the connection drops or something, it will go, "Oh, here's the script. Just import it yourself." And I'm like, "No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to try again." It would be great if it understood. Like, it's not the way to do it, right? But in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, if only you understood the mapping, like visually what I see and what your script, so that the script to what I see. If you understood that, you probably approach it 10 times better." Like that kind of.
And you know what? That's a really good point. And you can do that. I've actually done that with Playwright, right? Because I'm able to I did that at one point to really get it to finally get it. I'm like, I opened up, we have Playwright open here. And so I just go over to Xano and I just log in. So once I'm logged in, I say, go build an endpoint, go build it. And I want you to look at it. And it was like, I get it, right? It said, oh, I see. That was the first time where, so I guess that's another reason why I'm just mentioning Playwright, because there's all kinds of ways. Every day I'll just think about, oh, I could just, this way I was doing it, I could just cut the Gordian knot rather than try to untie it. I will just say, hey, just open up Xano and go look at what you're doing. You tell me what looks wrong to you. And it'll say, oh, I get it now. Like whenever I try to do it with this way, it doesn't work. And so we make some progress like that. Another way maybe to try to approach the problem. But yeah, until then, like the way that I'm approaching it is really through these. You can see that there's essentially taking the logic, the underlying, all the functionality of XanoScript and turning it into a library of functionalities, individual components and pieces that are like when I put it all together, right? And I want to actually use them in reality, it allows me to create syntax that's more, let's say, like this, where I can say exactly what I want. And this has a lot of other logic surrounding it because these actually build them dynamically. But the point is, if we look at maybe just like at an individual piece, like I can just say input and just define what I want, right? This is an input and this is these are the parts of it. And I get feedback on it because it's in TypeScript. Right, which is the point. I get that if there are errors from not leveraging it properly, I get immediate feedback, and that's where essentially forcing it to confront itself again. Right, if it cannot, because right now with XanoScript we don't get feedback. Right, you have to send it off to the parser. It either gets rejected wholly, completely, and then doesn't really tell you why. Like versus, and there's all kinds of potential errors. Now that I've converted it to TypeScript, basically, it means that it won't build. If it's going to try to build and it's going to show all the errors. It's going to say, oh, you didn't use this properly. You didn't use this properly. And then it's going to refine. And then it's going to be able to build it properly. And then it's going to work. And maybe Xano should be doing this instead of me. But
Maybe I can see that you're using, but that's one of the, it doesn't like, I don't know the Xano script.
Well, this is just for what I'm showing. So what I'm showing here, what does like it is the AI, right? Which is why even if I'm using the ampersand here, it won't make it to the Xano script. The Xano script will be whatever it's.
That's great.
I've taken the control away from the AI.
Yeah. keeps using ampersand.
Exactly. If you want, it's I'm like, fine. If you want to use ampersand, if you want to use comments, like, go ahead and do it. I'm going to create a filter that stops you from being able to make all these mistakes. I want to literally make it impossible for it to make mistakes.
I think, Robert, you probably, if you're looking at, if a lot of people are saying they're having trouble, and I can understand it because the results weren't ideal at the beginning. And I think I've got around it by forcing it to get round these continuous.
But not everybody is that determined.
That one's a repeat offender, that one. And if you can do a layer that basically translates that, I think.
Yeah,
will,
I mean, and I'll try to say in Workspace 7, using your middleware tool, create a group of CRUD endpoints and auth in the same API group. And we'll just do that. The idea is that for it to just be quicker, for it to use less tokens, and for it to be in the style that leverages Xano to its strength. So let's see if this one works. So it shows an error, but I think it actually did work. I just have to fix the response for it. But let me come back into here and look and see which one was it. Let me come back and check what happened. Okay, 1108. Oh, perfect. So actually it created it. So this was literally just created right now, right? With instantly, right? Almost completely instantly it was created. And I think this is the point. It's like, that's how good I want it to be for everything, right? And it's able to specify, right, that it wants 5 of them, or that it wants 3 of them, or if it wants auth on, or if it wants it off. And if I actually, and it's referencing tables that exist in the group. So it says it worked even though it showed 0. And so it's able to create variations, right? Because, and that's another whole idea that I have too, but if you take a bunch of applications and just boil them down, they essentially just become CRUD. Everything is CRUD. There's like a meme around that. But it's true. Like if I look, okay, so post list records, it just made this right now. If I just click on run, it just runs, right? Already. So it just ran, right? And this is a simple one. But if you look at this, there's a lot of small things that it did, which are the small details, right? If I look and I see query all records, and if I click in external, you see it knows how to set up these values all the way down at this level, right? The search value, the sort value, and set up the inputs, right? It's able to, there's no way that the AI would not be doing this, even if you begged it to. Like, it wouldn't know anything about how to create the syntax that results in this. And if I look at create record, for example, how does it know, right, out of the box, that these are the inputs that line up with the table? How does it know that? It's because I've added a step in between that has it search. You give it a table name. I have it search for that table, get the schema, and build out this endpoint with that schema matching, right? So that it's not going to just be a bunch of empty inputs. It's that when you want to add them, it's going to be already here, right? In the format that we like, the format that looks good on Xano, not expression syntax or any other type of ugly stuff. And even for this, like for auth login and auth register, which we can take for granted, but it is perfect, right? In the functions that it used to create this, like to create a token and so on. And that's it. I'm sorry, because I know we're just over the hour, but I think at least I got a chance to show you this is because I think it relates to you, especially in particular, Luke.
When's it coming out?
I think, I want to say, what's today? Wednesday, maybe Friday, I think Friday or Monday, something like that. I'm going to, probably what I'll do is I'll make it like that there's 2 of them. So you can still, in case the new one is weird in some type of way, I'll make them both available at the same time. So that way you're not, I mean, maybe that's also a good thing. So for us to stay on the same page, probably that's important too.
I am constantly using the tool now. Yeah,
for sure. No, thank you guys. It was a pleasure really to meet with you guys, to talk, and I'll be doing it again next week. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. If you have anything, just feel free to send me a message.
Thank you, Robert. Keep it going.
Cool. Sounds good. See you guys. Have a good one.
Robert, thank you.
See you. Of course, welcome. Bye.